Welcome to the Tao of Pizza, where we feature top logistics leaders, entrepreneurs, and supply chain innovators and share their inspiring stories with a holistic twist.
Mark Hiddleson here, host of the Tao of Pizza podcast, where I talk with top industry innovators in the warehousing, logistics, and supply chain business with a holistic twist. Before I introduce today's guest, Danny Medina, this episode is brought to you by Specialized Storage Solutions. Listen, I've been in the logistics and storage industry for several decades, and I know I don't look that old, but it's true. We provide industry-leading warehouse storage solutions nationwide. So basically, if you have a warehouse that needs rack shelving, carts, conveyors, or mezzanines, we help with the design, engineering, installations, inspections, and repairs to help clients optimize their logistics operations. Danny, you're not going to believe this. Sometimes people don't even realize we can actually help with the permit acquisition service. We take a holistic look at your entire business supply chain to develop the resources for continually improving your operation. To learn more, visit us at specialracks.com. Give us a call at 707-732-3892. And I even give my personal email for podcast listeners is markhiddleson@aol.com. So I got to give a big shout out to Nancy and Sal Fateen. Danny works with them at Structural Systems Inc. and Seismic Inc. And they've both been on the podcast before, so be sure to check out those episodes. But joining us today is Danny Medina. Danny is a 42-year veteran of the material handling industry. He's held positions with systems integrators, manufacturers, and for the last couple decades, he's been involved in the engineering and working with Structural Support Systems Inc., one of our top suppliers. They provide the fabrication of special engineered products such as conveyor supports, equipment platforms, catwalks, stairs, wall-mounted empty pallet shelves, storage rack repair components, and a multitude of custom products for use in the material handling industry. Danny, welcome to the Tao of Pizza.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's an honor and privilege to be with you. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this because you were one of my mentors. I get excited because I remember back when I was first brand new in this industry, and it's an industry where you kind of have to know what you're doing to sell something, and I didn't know what I was doing. So you took me under your wing and working for a manufacturer. Back then you were with Rack and Roll, and I don't think you even remembered the because when I asked you in the pre-interview questions, he said, I don't know where we met. It's just been that long. So thank you for all that tutelage in the early years.
Well, it's my privilege to do that. I can only keep what I have by giving it away, right? So yeah. I've been taught and I need to teach those.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you more about that, but one of the things I'm curious about is this industry is kind of unique in that a lot of people, at least a lot of people I know, that have long careers, and they all have different stories of how they got into it. So how did you get into this industry?
Well, I was just getting out of the service, the Navy, as a matter of fact. And I went through the paper and I saw an ad for an administrative some type of job that had something to do with office. And I applied for a company called Unarco, and they set me up with an interview, and that's where I started. So it was just by happen chance. I mean, I needed a job, and I fit the bill, and it was going to be someone who just started entering projects, just the small things that we do. And so that's where I started. Early on, there was a gentleman whose name's Mike Obel. I'll drop some names from time to time. I guess.
Yeah, I'd love that.
That's okay?
Yeah. Did you say Mike?
Mike Obie. Yeah, Mike, in fact, I work with him today still. He's here with us in this company.
Yeah, I know Mike.
So in those days, we didn't have the computers, right? And he was on a drafting board with an arm, and he was in his little old office there with Mr. Mike Wilms. And I would see him drawing these things. And I saw a drive-in system. And I got hooked on this thing called material handling, the way he was doing it and the way it got put together and all those things. That's how I got introduced to material handling.
Nice. And it was the drive-in. So that was your big hook with me. You taught me. I got hooked on drive-in and drive-in racks. they're in the in cold storage, which I'm in the California Central Valley. It's such a great way for freezer storage because I got a lot of pallets that are the same kind of stuff. And you taught me the ins and outs of it, and it's one of the advantages we have because a lot of people that sell those systems, they don't have the kind of knowledge that, they just get a quote from you guys and don't really ask what's going on. And what's funny, I was gonna bring this up in the early days. So in the early days, you were rack and roll, and that was kind of cool too because there were other manufacturers back then. It was they've all changed over the year in 25 years, but it used to be Anderson and LMT, and I would kind of be in competitive quotes. And the salesman in me would love to tell my customers, "Well, we're getting your stuff from Rack and Roll." My
Right.
customer's like, "Yeah, we want the Rack and Roll." Anderson sounds nice, and LMT stands for Lodi Metal Tech, but everybody wanted Rack and Roll. So, how did it go from Unarco to Rack and Roll?
Well, I'll be kind of quick about it because I did spend some time, I think 7 to 8 years with Unarco. There was back in those days, and again, I'll refer to those because the industry has changed since. There were some dedicated distributorships that manufacturers had, and at that time, Unarco had a distributor called Emmy Canfield Company, which is a direct competitor of Raymond and a few others out there. And that's where I actually met Sal and Art Canfield, my mentors. And so while I was there as the allied material handling person, they hired me away actually from Unarco. And so that's when I got involved with Mike Bacon, who owned Rack and Roll. He would solicit his business to us, and being a distributor, we were able to tap into various manufacturers. And so that's where I got acquainted with him. Then I got hired from him after I left Emmy Canfield Company. And so I started there. I think it was in Sun Valley is where we were. And I think that's where I had met you. So it was very nice to be able to know his product line. It was pallet rack, which I was well versed in, and representing him as a manufacturer at a small facility based on trying to get into the market of what you just described, the Andersons, the LMTs, back then Salmons was another one. So that's where we came in.
Yeah. And so Rack and Roll, we were racking and rolling. We did a few projects there, and I don't know if you remember, we did a towable tug project, the little trailers that hook to each other. And,
Yes.
I became an expert in those, and it's so surprising. You think they're these little carts, and you just pull them around, but it's hard sometimes to get an apples to apples comparison on that. I mean, you get a quote from one manufacturer, it'd be $1,500 a cart, and you get another one, will be $800 a cart. And then we look at it and go, well, these guys are using better casters. They're using a different turnion. They're using a different system, even just the way they clamp and lock together. And that was one of the things you helped me. When you're selling like this, you really have to be careful, apples to apples. And a lot of customers, hopefully they'll give you that opportunity to look at, if your quote's way off, if you're way high, and you don't want to be way low either.
Right.
So how did you learn that? How did you learn that skill?
Well, the fundamentals I was taught at an early beginning, and that came from the Art Canfields, the Sal Fateens, the Len Wards, the Ron Micases, all of those gentlemen. It was foundational. When you came into this industry, specifically going to, let's say, Emmy Canfield Company, where it really began, you were expected to have a working knowledge of what it is you're selling. So you could bring the value added that you just discussed or spoke about. And, it's funny because that transitions through all those years to where I'm at today, even here with Sal and Seismic and Nancy. It's value added. It's those little things that you talked about that only time can tell. So when we're learning and taught these things, they just ingrain them in you, right? So you always want to have that as a foundation, no matter what you do, especially in our industry. When you're competing against people that come with a different design or something, why is ours better? What makes us and sets us apart from the competitor? That's what you do, and you excel at it, and that's what we do here still. So it's fundamental. It was taught to me at a very young age, and I just continue to grow on that. So as I bring that into whatever I do, It's natural. It's a natural thing now.
Yeah, and now you're starting to this is awesome too. You're starting to train some of our people like Nick, who have Nick Levy does our drawings, and he's been doing drawings and stuff, and kind of he does a lot of stuff we need to give to you. I used to send it on the back of a cocktail napkin and he would deal with it. Now I send the cocktail napkin to Nick, and then Nick sends it to you. And but you've trained them. And Cody, you haven't had a lot with Cody, but Cody works for us. He's a project manager, and we just built that platform. And you're training my guys on the same thing. So thank you for that too. So is that are we just the lucky the lucky ones in the bunch, or or is that's how you've approached your careers, is to
I was very fortunate to come in at an age when it wasn't as big as it is now. You couldn't go online and buy what we needed to do. You actually had to take time to study something and offer an alternative that sets you apart from your competitors. And that's something that I was very fortunate coming into at the time I did. I mean, let's face it. I didn't get this grade by just osmosis, right?
yeah.
I was in when they had to do blueprints through a machine with ammonia to create these. Now it's all done by AutoCAD. Um, I was blessed with the fact that the gentlemen that I talked about, Sal and Art and all of those, took the time to teach me and made sure that I had an understanding before I was set out there, because that's something that's lost, right? In my opinion. So
Yeah.
it's up to me to have to teach those that are willing to learn. I do have a lot to offer, I think, in that regard. So, I just came in at the right time, and thank people like yourself who allow me to express this and get it out. I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's all, it's the relationships that we have. Like, things don't always go smooth on every project, contrary to popular belief. Uh, and so you and I have had some home runs in that. A lot of what I learned was on the mistakes, and I'm talking those mistakes happened 23, 24 years ago. And then even had customers where we finished the project and we kind of lost the customer for a while, but I followed up. And because of the mistakes that we had made, I knew kind of where the pitfalls are. That's one of the things of experience. I mean, you never find anything, but you get good at solving
Right,
problems. And so you help me with that part too. When something does go wrong, okay, let's sit down, let's regroup. What are our options? What are the resources? Who can we call? Can we call Sal?
right.
Can we call we can't call Micus anymore? And I'm glad you brought that up. He was a huge mentor for me. You really helped him become a great sales rep, and Micus kind of took me to a different level of thinking more like an owner.
Right.
He told me what I needed to do is grow a pair of balls. Which I thought I already had, but I guess I was wrong.
Well, when you're in those realms with him and who he hung out with, yeah, you needed to be. You were definitely in the realm of what we'll call the rack pad of material handling. They were the men, right?
Yeah.
They knew how to be men.
And so he just taught me a lot about getting bigger projects. Got partnership a lot with him. I partnered on bigger projects that I thought were kind of too big for me to handle at the time. And then working with him over the time, I was able to kind of take it over and do myself. So um, I'm always looking for those opportunities to give back to, and because of people like you that Danny helped me, Sal helped me, Ron helped me. So I'm always looking. Luckily, we have some younger guys coming up in our company, like Nick and Cody and Drake. And we've got a new guy, Spencer, you don't know yet, but he's going to be learning the 24-hour prelim program.
Right.
So
Excellent.
we're ramping everything up. Uh, the platforms, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I don't want to get too much into the project, but we have a fun one that we're doing. I know you have a little platform on your shirt too. I like
Right.
that. And your logo is really similar to ours. Well, we're building these storage platforms, the mezzanines, like some people call it. Looks like kind of like a tree house, but you can really optimize your storage with those. And they're not the easiest to permit. But say something about how we kind of have an advantage of because we did have issues come up, right? And it seems like a lot of building departments, they sub out their plans to get checked in our industry because it's seismic engineering. Very few building departments do it in house. And when they send it out, it seems like the outside consultants almost have to say, something about the design. And then you have to respond. So
right. Well, what's key, I think, is like here, we have a reputation that's been built over many years of doing this, both from Nancy, the submittal service side with the permits direct, and Sal being who he is, just being licensed and just so well versed in everything. Answering the questions is key. It just is. When they ask you a question, they'll have it very direct. They'll point out a section, and to take the time and answer the question, not just be so vague. Sal, number one, is huge on that. We need to answer the question because we don't want to keep coming back over and over again. There's subtle differences between what's called a platform and a mezzanine, and I'm sure you've heard about those. One's tying into the building, the other's within the building. It's subtle. We hear it at structural supports and seismic. We love to refer to them as platforms for that reason. And if Sal on his previous podcast, if you talked about that, or Nancy, both well versed in either one, it was explained then. And it's very subtle, but it makes a huge difference. So we want to make sure that we have the knowledge of how these questions come about in the first place and what are they really asking? Because a lot of times what we'll find out is, and no, not to despair anyone, you'll have what we call book engineers, right? They come directly out, they're hired at the building. And so they're looking at something that they've never really even been out to see, let alone install where we come in. We have not only the working knowledge of how to make these, but we have the fundamental of the application of why it's used. So knowing the product, knowing the things that are going to come up is helpful. Why do you need the stab to be X or the foot plate? How can you get away with, wrong choice of words, how can we reuse or restate something that's going to get us the permit that we need? Is it really what they're asking for, that this has to fit in this little small widgets, or can we look at a different code section and offer an alternative? So those are the things that are key for us, and we're really good at it. We excel at it, and as we just recently did a project with you, that to be the case. We were able to look at something and say, well, don't look at it this way. This code we want to use over here. They agreed with us, and we were successful at that. So that's key, knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, and we actually, in that one, we had to undo a little bit because they did call it a mezzanine. And I do want to say that again because, and that's what people, just in the popular vernacular or the way people say it, they say mezzanine. Everybody knows what you're talking about. When you say pre-engineered storage platform, it seems like something else. Like, no, I don't want one of those. I want a mezzanine.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing, but legally it's not a mezzanine because mezzanine is a bunch of different meanings to it.
Correct.
From the building code perspective. So we actually went in and we got our permit much faster. I think it took them like 6 months to get it approved that way. And I think we got ours approved in, I wasn't happy about it, but it was like 2 months.
Right.
Which is a third. It's too long. It's just like the microwave, right? Like it used to take a half hour to cook your food. Now it's 90 seconds in the microwave and you're still going, come on, I need to get it going.
Right. So time is money. People want to get up and running.
Yeah, and what you talked about, the plans being blueprints, even when I got in 97, so CAD had taken off in other industries. So our industry has been, I wouldn't say it's behind. Now it's kind of ahead of the curve, but it was always kind of the last to get into it. So CAD drawing wasn't even, in the 90s. We were still doing a lot of stuff by hand. I know a lot of the projects we did, sometimes I used a ruler, sometimes I didn't. I'd taken drafting in high school and I kind of like, sitting down and doing a sketch, but look at how much faster things are now that you can just, you see, are we getting all the efficiencies on that? Sometimes I think, I used to carry blueprints around in my arm like this and go and, sometimes even cut out with paper and put it on like, this is what we're doing. And then mail it, like FedEx it. So then you're not going to get it till the next day. Then you're not going to work on it till the next day. So have you seen it really speed up as far as what we can get done in a day?
Yeah, it really has. I've observed this, and Nancy's been key at doing this, to be honest with you, because she was so entwined with submittal services and permitting, right? once COVID hit, what we found was a lot of building departments didn't want to have you come in person and do what we just discussed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we saw was a whole new dynamic taking shape where everybody had to do it signing and submitting them electronically. So change, which nobody likes to do, that's one factor that has changed and continues to this day, which has sped up the process where normally we go drop them off and then they enter them in. Now it's like it's in. So just that in and of itself has sped up the process. And then everything's being done electronically now, emails and coming back and forth. And so it has sped up, I'd say at least 30%, if I had to put a number on it, of what we normally are used to doing.
Yeah.
So, and that was by an accident, I guess, or fate, whatever you want to call it. But it seems the way that things are going, and for old people like myself, change is always hard. You youngsters are able to adapt to it maybe a lot better than I can, with the exception of Sal. I mean, honestly, he knows everything about electronic. He's all about that. So it's helped the industry a lot. And the ability to change a drawing through AutoCAD is so much faster now. I could pop up one right now and change a dimension while we're speaking. We can make the changes on the fly without having to go back to the board and doing an erasure. And then, so it's so much better.
And how come it always takes me so long to get the answers I want of this stuff?
Well, it depends on who you ask, right?
Set you up for that one.
You did. But you know what? Let me say this. I'll answer it this way, because when we give you the answer, it's the right answer, and it took a little time to get all the right information.
No, you're absolutely right. I was just giving you a hard time on that. It does take time.
Okay.
And I hope I'll make sure Nick hears that part too, because he and I, a lot of times it has to go back and forth a couple times. I want it right when we send it to you, and that's one of the things for us that we've gotten way back in the last 5 years, just on communication on us, making sure before we send it to seismic or even structural systems where we have a design, whether it was the platform, like this is what we want to build, make sure we have the right details, that we're looking at the right thing. Because you think it's not rocket science, but on that one, it had to fit perfectly. So if it was off by 3 inches on the width of the base plate, that 3 inches had to be trimmed off. Right. Not saying that actually happened.
Right. You're not saying it actually did, but wink, nod. I get it.
It did, yeah.
And those companies such as ourselves that are capable of thinking on the fly and coming up with the fix, like right now, that's relationship building. That and not only that, for us to know that your client as well, that the ability to change on the fly, make it work, is something that we strive at, unlike anybody else. I mean, it's one of the things we do here.
Yeah, because you have so many options, so many people, like heads you can get together. And you mentioned Nancy a few times. I was going to ask you at the end, but I was going to. Nancy is one of my best friends. I've known her. I think she started Submittal Services in 2005. Is the same thing. The same year I started Specialized Storage Solutions. We have a personal friendship, but I admire her as a businesswoman. But she's elite. Like, you work for Nancy, right? Well, I think I work for Nancy. It's we were helping her set up for an event one time. My wife was helping her, and I'm like, "Well, will you help?" She said, "Yep." She said, "Nancy's walking around, and she's got a list. It was a table, like how to set the table. She's got a floor plan. She's got a list. She's wearing black boots up to here, and she's in charge and making things happen." So, you've been there for a long time. So the culture must be fantastic there. So what is it like? I mean, I know she's tough, but what makes her a good leader?
She's firm. She's, I've known her. I went to her 4-year-old birthday party to be exact, right? And I remember it. I remember it well. And to see her grow into this position, it's in her genes. Number one, let's just get that out of the way, and I have seen her come from this place to being the president of this company, and it's well deserved. She knows what she's doing. She has the ability to learn quickly, speak clearly, and give you clear direction, which is fundamental for anybody. It's an honor to work for someone who has that characteristic. One thing I do want to go back to what you said about her walking around with the list and everything else. I must say, on top of that, one of the most gracious hosts you'll ever see. I mean, sometimes I go to those functions and I just look and observe, from her mom to Sal to her and her sister. They are such gracious hosts in any
Yeah.
event. And you're right, she can be, I don't want to say hard, but hard, wink,
Yeah.
wink.
No, I think it's tough. I like, yeah, it's,
She will definitely make it known what is expected and expects that of you. Very fair. So it's a blessing I get to work with her.
yeah, yeah. I've always been impressed with Nancy. I like working with her. And it's just fun when you have people like that and they care enough. And I'm looking at our second generation. It's not always like that in businesses. And I have my kids coming up in the business. That's another reason why I asked you, because I want that kind of energy, that kind of leadership. And it's not everybody, not everybody has it. And she's gifted. And you're right. There's a gracious side. And I guess that's what makes it awesome, right? It can
But
be
there
tough.
is that business side.
In the
And
business.
the other thing that makes it a pleasure is she understands situations, is able to think clearly and quickly, uh, doesn't make a lot of knee-jerking decisions, which
Yeah,
is very helpful. Uh, Great listener,
yeah,
and she's a lot like Sal.
yeah. And she's built a great team too. It's one of the hard things for me. And it's kind of the same with you. Like I always pick up the phone and call you, even if it's not your job. It's like, well, I'm gonna call Danny about because it's a big company. There's like 100 employees or 60 employees or something. And uh even when Nancy was in 2005, 2000, when she wasn't the president, I called her for stuff that I needed to get done because I knew she was that kind of person that even if it wasn't her job, she could get it done or give me the inside track on what was the best way to approach it. So now I don't think haven't had to ask for help on anything all these years, right? Because he's got a great team, and you and I are taking care of stuff. So
Right.
I told Nancy one time, like I only call her if I need something. So
We know
like,
that.
it's like I'm a bad friend, a good client, because you don't want people calling you all the time if they don't need anything, right? I mean, what's kind of nice just to say hi, but we're busy, right?
Yeah. Well, see, when you get to be on the A list, so to
Yeah,
speak, you're allowed to do those kind of things.
yeah.
And
So now I joke around. I call her just to say, like, "Hey, I just want to check in. I'll just say hi." She's always waiting. Like, then okay. And what do you need?
right.
What's the big ask? What's thank you for that. So no, that's cool. That's awesome. And you've helped us build our team. Your team is getting stronger. It's a good partnership.
It's
So
one that we've taken time to build, and thank you for that.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. So this business is you've already mentioned some mentors. And I wanted to ask you what was the transition? So Rack and Roll got bought out, that's what I was starting to talk about. I was Rack and Roll. I was really pushing the Rack and Roll. And actually I want to look and see if anyone owns that name anymore.
Right. That's a good one.
But they got bought out. Hannibal Material Handling ended up buying out Rack and Roll and Anderson and starting up a California. I don't even think they were in the rack business, right? So
No, they're tube company.
so what happened? What was the transition when they bought that out? There was quite a while. A lot of the projects we did were when you were with Hannibal. So
Right. That was an interesting dynamic. It was a tube company. And for those who are familiar with the name Rich Lytle or Rick Kincaid, they were in the shelving manufacturing. And they were brought on board to Hannibal as well. And so they had strong uh, manufacturing traits in material handling where the Hannibal tubing did not. So they did right by getting them together. They bought Rack and Roll. They moved us over to their facility over by their tubing. I think it was in Commerce, and we had the small little facility there, and we started building the name of Hannibal. I came in because of my knowledge of Rack, and so they gave me the title of engineering. I was heading up the engineering department at that time, and design. So we actually set up a nice little. They brought over the roll formers. They started that whole process. It was a small operation, and it grew and grew. Steve Rogers was the head of that. He came over from the tube side and learned a lot about the industry. So hats off to him. We also got a gentleman by the name of what's his name? Gary Steen.
Gary
He
Steen.
also used to come to my office at Rack and Roll. He was a crown lift guy, right? Forklift.
Oh,
And
I
we
didn't
would
know
discuss
that.
material handling. So it was like an integration of a whole lot of things. There was a learning curve of how do you meld the tube side with manufacturing. And actually turned out to be a good fit because you roll form tubes, you slit, you get the coils. And we had that side on the manufacturing side, and gave us somewhat of an advantage to our competitors because of the amount of steel coils that were purchased from the tube side. And you had a willingness of people to help. We actually had a gentleman by the name of Vadim. He was a tool and die guy. So we had our own tool and die set up. If something went down, we just had him fix it. He designed certain things, and we were off and running. So if I recall correctly, we took a number of things and we put it all together and it worked. And then we had landed the Home Depot account, which was excellent for us. And so we went off and running. So once in a while, if I want to know where I come from, I go there and I see Home Depot and there's that rack. And to this day, it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big. So Hannibal went from, buying Rack and Roll in Anderson, which Anderson was decent in Northern California, but Hannibal's probably the biggest in California now, aren't they? I would think, or we.
I would think so, but that was an aggressive move. I mean, it took at that time maybe about 7, 8 years. I don't quote me on that, but that's when we started buying Anderson. We know we needed to expand if we wanted to really compete in this market, and that's what they did. And they remained aggressive. I mean, Hannibal actually went into, if you recall, Inca in Texas. They bought them, and then they went into the Midwest even. So they got really large and do really well for themselves. And it really started from small beginnings. And with hard work and dedication, they built an empire, I'd say.
Yeah, Hannibal is. They're the ones to beat here, and we just toured the Space Rack facility in Lodi. We use them quite a bit because it's close to the valley here, and that was a fun tour. I can't think of the last name, but the guy's name was Wes. He used to run the Interlake plant.
Okay.
Was in Lodi. So there's another. Yeah, this business. Once you get in this business, it's like the Hotel California.
You will never get out.
Because he even went. So that Interlake plant shut down kind of when I got in the business, like late '90s, the one up here, and he went into building steel buildings or something like that. But when Heartland Steel Products bought out the Lodi facility, he asked him to come back and run it. So he's back in the business. Great tour, great facility. They make a great product. It's interesting over the years, the paint. I mean, you guys powder coat everything, right?
We do.
And that makes a difference. I remember the old days of Anderson, the paint would still be drying on the rack.
Right.
And it wasn't that good. I think the Hannibal almost immediately shut that plant down when they bought it. They did a quick ship out of there or something, but they didn't use it.
It didn't stay too long, no.
Yeah. But the Space Rack LMT was always famous for their paint job. And for us, and we saw a lot of used material too. So a lot of my customers, looks like it's racking. They don't care about the paint job. But I have other clients, like this one we did with the platform. That's beautiful, by the way. It's the same color. I'll post some pictures of it on the notes of this so people kind of know. It's the real thing of the version of what's on the logo of your shirt.
Right.
But their paint line. And so, but when a customer does care about paint, they care. Right. I mean,
of course, it shows them that you care about them.
Yeah.
The fundamentally, Mark, as well as I do, that this is all about building relationships and partnerships with those who purchase from us, and us being an extension of you, knowing that what we sell you, you're going to be proud that you sold. And so that's just something that is main point for us here. That's one of sales mandates is you will take care of our clients. You will put something out there that you're proud of. And the look and aesthetics is one of those things that we are very in tune with.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to ask you, are there any more mentors that you wanted to mention? I know you mentioned Ron and Sal. the guys at ME Canfield or Canfield. It was ME Canfield. Seems like everybody came from ME Canfield. That's not,
There
Joe.
was a reason for that. Yeah.
Joe at American Warehouse is from ME Canfield. I mean, I could think of a lot of the ME Canfield was the start of something big.
To answer your question, the ones that I've been fortunate to stay in long terms, like 20 years here with Sal, 10 with Unarco, and there was also Hannibal. There was a 10-year run there. I did some with Rack and Roll. You speak about mentors. The ones that stick out in my mind are the ones that I had mentioned, to be honest with you. The ones that are really going to stick with you, and they've been through thick and thin with me, as I've grown from a youngster, trials and errors of life in general. I know that I'm able to go and talk to any one of those gentlemen that are still here with me, which would be Sal.
Yeah.
If I had to mention some others, it'd be, there's so many. My head just got fluttered with them.
Yeah.
I can see their faces, right?
Or how about
there's a lot of them.
What about other dealers that you've worked with, like other people, my competitors or potential competitors, or in this business, a lot of we saw a lot of wholesale projects too. So
I really cut my teeth with advanced storage systems and their pushback. So I really cut there. I was with them for a little bit. So that's where I learned that. Then I also got involved with a company called Rapid Rack, which did the shelving, the boltless shelving. We were competitors from Western Pacific at that time. And I cut my teeth on those. So that's where I first learned about catwalk shelving.
Jim, the guy there it's Randy. It was Randy
Taylor.
Randy Taylor and Jim Long, right?
Yes. Jim Long came from Salmons, right? When I was at Rapid, we bought Salmons because we wanted to expand the rack. Jim Long came from Salmons. Randy Taylor came from Western Pacific, I believe. And we merged all that together. So even before that, Mason Novinger would be a mentor. He was an old man in the shelving, and he was, you do it this way, and this is the way you're going to do it. But Mason Novinger would have been a mentor of mine. I've been fortunate that these guys have helped me become the man I am today as well, not just in material handling, but they took an interest in my personal well-being. And even if I tripped and fell, they didn't harm it against me, and they would help me grow and get out of it. So the gentlemen that I spoke of earlier, the Sals, the Rons, Len Wards, Tony Gonzalez, who's no longer with us, was a mentor, as rough as he was.
He was rough because he ran the operations side of
he ran
structural system, right? And all the
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was because your stuff was always on time, though, right? It was never any, a lot of times, like, you've got a projected date or anything, it could be off a few days. You guys were always on it, right?
Yeah, we didn't have a choice. We still don't have a choice. And if we're going to be late, I've got to make sure I tell you ample time so you can prepare.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. So we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up. So I wanted to ask you your hobbies. You still have a Harley Davidson?
I've got two, not to brag, but yeah, I've got an old Softail and a Dyna. Yeah, I ride, and I get that wind therapy. And I was told that when my bikes were down and it was like couldn't ride, people could tell. I mean, I guess I would come in a little more antsy than normal, but it wasn't just the coffee, right? I wasn't able to ride. So that's a hobby of mine, definitely.
How long have you been? When did you get your first bike?
I think I was like legally probably 18. Okay, but I've been riding since I've been, 12.
That's what my stepdad was over, and he was talking to my kids, and he was like, "Yeah, things used to be different." He's in his, he's almost 80, and he grew up in the Central Valley, and he said, he goes, back then the cops knew everybody, and my kids were like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, they knew you because they'd be chasing you on your motorcycle through the orchards,
right?"
And then you'd see them downtown.
You hear this all the time. It tries, times have changed. We all know that, but that's an absolute truth. We'd run down the railroad tracks on our mini bikes going across the riverbeds, and the cops would chase us and just wave, say, "Okay, get home." So we would.
Yeah, it was good, clean fun, and as long as you weren't doing other stuff, which unfortunately some of us did it. But
Yeah.
we don't have time. We're running out of time.
I'll raise my hand on that one.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And there was something else you reminded me when you said about the personal. I was thinking about this morning because I knew we were meeting. A lot of times I remember from the time my daughter was born until she went to kindergarten. uh, I always worked at home on Fridays because my wife and I worked it out where she worked on all her work on Friday and Saturday, and I would take Fridays to work. I was still working, but taking care of a baby. And I remember working with you during those days, and I'd schedule a lot of my calls or stuff that I was doing on Friday because I'm like, well, Danny gets it. Because I don't think like I was always kind of nervous about that, like customers judging me because I'm working from home. Because back then, it was 2000, and people weren't work from home wasn't. I thought people were going to judge me like, oh, you're just in your pajamas working and everything. But I used to work. I've worked a lot on. uh, so that was cool. I remember I was like, well, Danny gets it. He knows that I'm working. And if he hears a baby crying in the background or I got to stop the conversation and change a diaper, it's
That's
like,
what you got to do.
that's the important stuff, right? Because I know,
Yes.
yeah, that was one of the most proud things. Like, I'm a dad first, right? I'm a material handling salesman, but a dad first. So
Right. We do this so we can be that. It's
exactly.
it's so much bigger than just a job.
Yeah.
It helps us do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad we just kind of bumped into each other a few that when you were with Seismic and I didn't know. And man, I was excited when I found out. Like, oh, Danny's in Seismic. That's why I got Nancy and Danny. And
Yeah.
so last question, what are your do you have any apps? Like we're talking about, doing drawings by hand and everything, and we've evolved with the new, but is there any technology that you use that's new that you just kind of found out, or uh, programs you like to use?
Well, AutoCAD, obviously, the 3D inventor, which we have here, uh, is proving itself to be a great feature. I've got to come on board with that a little more, I'm afraid.
What
Can't
is
teach old
it?
dog
It's a
inventors a 3D program of AutoCAD. It lets you
Oh,
flip
okay.
things and you can look at things. And, me being old school,
Right.
change doesn't come as easy as it should, but I'm working on that. I'm a work in progress,
Yeah, yeah,
progress, not perfection. That's happening. And the, uh, the new things that we're trying out are being able to take cameras, 360 views, and have that measure and use that as a tool. So uh, those are the things that are out here, and as it evolves, we're going to try to evolve with it so we can be current. Fortunately for us, the staff I have in my CAD department, they're young, they're energetic, they're knowledgeable in this stuff. It can be a little intimidating, so they like I'm the old guy, right? And they're going to do really, really well. So that's the new things in material handling itself. Um, it's the robots that are coming on,
yeah,
right? As our industry's grown from drive-in to push back to robotics now. If you remember back in the old days, guided wire systems, we have
yeah,
all that's coming on board. So we're fortunate that we're partnered with some people with the robotic side of retrievals um, that's going to be a big thing. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing.
yeah. Me too. Even in the automation side and in the robotics, it's just the safety equipment that has to go around it. I mean, a lot of those are projects. That's a completely interviewed Milt. Do you know Milt Tandy from Wirecrafters?
I do.
Yeah. So I had Milt, and Milt has a show too. Mondays with Milt. Did you know
No, I
that?
didn't know that.
Yeah, we were doing a Wirecrafters project, and uh I hadn't talked to him in probably 10 years. So I just kind of looked it up and I Googled him, and it comes up. Yeah, he's got every week they kind of converted his sales meeting because he kept cracking jokes or doing different things. It was educational about their products. And so their marketing guy said, hey, we're going to start doing these Mondays with Milt. And so he's had it for
Excellent.
about 3 years. They do it once a week. But yeah, he's got a racehorse. And but when I interviewed him, he said that one. I hadn't even really thought of it. That's one of the reasons I'm doing these is I'm finding out, hey, what do I need to be looking for? Because that's something we can do if we're not doing the robots. I mean, we're a good resource for finding people who do that, but we will provide the barriers, right? Or the safety protection, the platforms or
So I'm going to piggyback on what you just said, and I'll go back to the very beginning of like working with Art Canfield.
Uh-huh.
He would challenge us. We're a forklift house, is what he would say.
Yeah.
Right? He says, you go on a sales call to sell a forklift. What about the trash can? What about this? What about that? So if you go and just selling a forklift, what else are you passing up? Especially a person in your position, when you go out to sell a platform or whatever it is you're going to do, there's something else that needs to be done.
Yeah.
He would tell me, I'll never forget one time he said, that person needs a scale so he can weigh his stuff. You need to sell him a scale. And I'm going, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
So that is the mentorship that I was in. So it's for you to say that now, you've got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, Danny. Thank you so much. I know I forgot to say this is your time off. Like, you got off, so you're off the clock, man.
You know,
you've been a great friend, great mentor, great resource. I love working with you. You're top of the charts, man. I've been looking forward to this. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Once again, it was an honor and a privilege. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for listening to the Tao of Pizza podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.